Hi, I'm Sara.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode. Introduction: who are we and what are we doing?
Sara, what movie are we doing this week?
This week, we will be talking about The President's Last Bang. And we are excited to welcome our special guest star, cartoonist and Eisner Award nominee, Ryan Estrada.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this because I've spent the last 5 years writing books about this time in history. And this is my first time watching the film since learning what was going on during that period. So I'm excited to break it all down and give you some very weird context from all the strange things that were going on back then.
We are excited to get it. Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie contains depictions of political corruption, violence, proto-K-pop, copious cigarette smoking, alcohol abuse, misogyny, men wearing suits that make them all look very similar to each other, lots of guns, blood, and parental negligence. Also, sex work.
Nationalism. I would say toxic nationalism and also toxic masculinity. I think you've hit on most of it.
Okay.
Something for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a film for the whole family.
If you have a toddler, they'll love it.
Toddlers will love this movie. Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Sources used in the episode include the internet.
But this week we have an expert.
Welcome to Ryan Estrada. He is a Freeman Award-winning Eisner-nominated artist, author, and adventurer. His biographies of his wife, Kim Hyun-suk's experiences smuggling books under the nose of a dictator include Banned Book Club, No Rules Tonight, and Good Old-Fashioned Korean Spirit. His biography of UFO death cult survivor Amy Rose was an Excellence in Graphic Literature Award finalist. He reports on movies and film festivals for Korean Public Radio and dozens of podcasts, and his work can be found at ryanestrada.com. We'll link to that in the show notes. Also, fun fact about Ryan, he invented the word normcore.
I did. It was an accident. Didn't mean to. Accidentally thrust that upon the world.
We're grateful for it because honestly, it is a word that is needed. And we didn't have it, and now we do. And I personally find it very valuable and use it a lot. So thank you.
Happy to be of service. It was just a joke in a comic, and the world ran with it.
Listen, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
So to start, I don't know if you've seen the old SNL sketches with Chris Farley interviewing a famous person, but that was kind of how I felt when I was preparing questions for you, where I was reading your webpage and reading about you. And my questions are, how awesome is your wife? And how cool is it that you wrote Garfield comics? And remember that time you coined a word that is now in the dictionary. All that said, I do have a real question for you, which is, how did you first come upon this film?
So I had seen this years ago. I dove into Korean cinema when I first came to Korea. I first came here in 2002. And I was just discovering this whole new history of film that I'd never seen before, and learning all the different genres and how there really aren't genres in Korea. Like, a film will be whatever genre it feels like being in that moment. Which is why I'm like, am I allowed to suggest this? Is this a biopic or is it something else? Every movie is like 10 different things. And so I saw this movie early on and didn't really understand it, as I said. I didn't even realize how much what was happening in that film was affecting everyday life in Korea still. And so now, after having, to answer one of your previous questions, my wife is very, very cool. Having talked to her about the fight for freedom and her friends that were actually in situations like depicted in this movie. There's a scene going through the torture rooms. Her friends were all in those torture rooms, and she barely escaped going to them just by being smart about faking her way through an investigation by weirding out the cops enough that they didn't take her there. After having talked to people who suffered through all these things, then now watching this movie is a very, very different experience.
Wow. I want to sit down and ask her a billion questions because I thought some of the scenes where they were depicting the torture rooms were really well shot. The tracking shots of showing all of those were really impressive. It's so weird how quotidian it is portrayed in this movie, like where it's just sort of like, yeah, this is just walking through the police station where you're seeing stuff in the background. That was like so astonishing to see that happening in the movie. I want to know more about everything after having watched this because I was sort of fascinated by all of this.
Ryan, you alluded to this earlier, but can you tell us about the biopic as a genre in South Korea?
The biopic in Korea, it's not a huge genre. Like, it, depending on how you define it, there's probably like 20 to 25 movies you could consider to be biopics made in Korea that I can think of. They're very different in that number one is about who they decide to focus on. So if you imagine there's about 20 movies in this genre, 3 of them are about the people who assassinated Park Chung-hee in 3 different genres. There's The President's Last Bang, which is like the satire version. There's The Man Standing Next, which is the drama version, and then there's The Land of Happiness, which is the courtroom drama version. There's 2 different biopics about the people who assassinated Ito Hirobumi, the Prime Minister of Japan during Japanese occupation. There's Anarchist from Colony, which is about the assassins of Prince Hirohito. Darn near half of them are about assassins, and the rest of them are about political activists, labor activists, people who fought for freedom, poets who fought for freedom, attorneys who fought for freedom. So in Korea, the biopic is resistance. Every one of these films is saying how people feel about the people in power. And whereas in the United States, often the biopic is meant to like attract awards attention, in Korea, it attracts legal attention. Especially with this film, there were lawsuits. They had to cut parts of the film out and put them back in. They had to pay restitution to the family. And that often happens where like libel laws are very strict here. So whenever they make one of these movies, they know what they're getting into and they do it with the full knowledge that there's something they want to say. So every one of the films you could talk about is it's resistance. That's why I picked this film, because I think it's a good example of that in both what it was trying to say and the fallout of that.
So I have to ask the questions we always ask. What is your favorite biopic? And also, what is a biopic you wish would get made?
If I stick with Korean biopics, there's another film called Chuntae-il, A Flame That Lives On. It is an animated biopic. And so it's basically if Studio Ghibli made a movie about labor activism. And it is fascinating. Who do I wish would get a biopic made about them? I think it'd be cool if America started the trend of Korean biopics and did biopics about people whose name I'm not even going to say on the podcast, because it would be so much drama to even mention them on a podcast that they'd never make a movie about them.
Cool. Thank you.
If you want to know more about Korea, the easiest thing in the world, it sounds like the hardest thing in the world, but you can learn the Korean alphabet in 15 minutes. On my website, there's a comic called Learn to Read Korean in 15 Minutes. And that is not a joke. People have read that comic and 15 minutes later knew how to read the Korean alphabet. It's the easiest alphabet in the world. The letters always make the same sound. There's less of them. If you do that, you can really jump into to Korea.
Wow.
You see us both like...
It looks like it's Japanese, but it's not. All the symbols are just letters squished together. They're very easy to read. Much like right now, when I walk around, I find it easier. Like when signs are written in 2 languages, I find it easier to read the Korean than the English.
So embarrassed to say this, but I always associated South Korea with a political stability that clearly it does not necessarily have.
Well, it kind of has recently, just because of all these things that happened in the 70s and 80s, because people talk about it, because people make movies about them, because people tell stories about them, people know exactly what the consequences of letting that stability lapse are. One of the wild things about rewatching this movie wasn't just having learned about that point in history, but having learned about what's going on right now. I'm like, was this made about 2 months ago? Because the current, most recent president, he's now been impeached, but was doing the exact same things as were in this movie. And the people were like, oh, no. We know exactly what happens. we saw the movie, and we were there. It was shut down within 6 hours. He declared martial law, just like you saw in the opening. And within 6 hours, the people got out of bed, went to the courthouse, and were standing in front of guards with guns and helping lawmakers jump over the fence so they could go vote down the martial law, and got them removed, because people know. And that's why people take the risk to make films like this and to tell stories like this, because it does have an effect. And so there have been a couple of times in the recent Korean history where people have tried to bring this back. Park Chung-hee's own daughter came back and tried to do the exact same thing, and the people shut it down. No country is perfect. You can still get idiots into power who want nothing but power, but Korea has built something through communication, through talking about these things, through remembering these things, that as soon as that happens, it is stomped down immediately.
It must be so nice to live in a society where people are smart.
It is amazing to live. Every time something happens, people are like, oh my God, are you okay? Do you need to escape the country? And I'm like, I am so happy to be here. Where it sounds scary to you because it was fixed. Whereas things that are happening elsewhere in the world just keep happening, so you're used to them and you don't realize that they're very, very bad.
So amazing.
Ryan, can you please tell us a little bit about South Korean President Park Chung-hee, his political career, and the circumstances around his assassination that inspired the president's last bang?
He was the second highest military officer when he decided all of a sudden, you know what, this is enough power for me. I want more. And so in 1961, he led a very bloody, violent coup to take over the government. And even though he was not the rightful leader, he kind of got away with it by giving people what they wanted, letting the rich make money. And by letting the rich people money, he supposedly fixed the economy. But that was by creating horrible labor rights violations and making life difficult for the ordinary people, but make life a lot better for the people that had the power to keep him in power. And he just kept doing worse and worse things to stay in power, until he was ready to massacre a lot of students just for saying they didn't like him. And that's when the KCIA stepped in and decided to take him out themselves.
And Sarah, can you please tell us a bit about South Korean movie The President's Last Bang? And Ryan, please interject here for context if you wish.
Yes. So The President's Last Bang is a 2005 satirical black comedy by South Korean director Im Sang-Soo about the events leading to and the aftermath of the assassination of Park Chung-hee, who was then the South Korean president, by his close friend and the KCIA director Kim Jae-kyu. The budget was $4.5 million. Box office was $6.2 million. This movie was a box office success. So it screened at the Cannes Film Festival and dealt with a lot of controversy at the time of its release in terms of just having things excised from it that were later restored. And it only took about a year or so for it to be restored to its original cut. Initially, there was, I think, 3 minutes of just black screen in the film to indicate this is where they made us cut. It also served a lot of function in the education of the population about being politically active, which we respect, and our movies don't do that most of the time. I just watched a movie about a chimp playing Robbie Williams, so I don't even know what's happening anymore. Biopics have taken a real turn for me.
Can you imagine a Hollywood film spending 2 hours dunking on what a terrible person a recent president was, and then showing footage of your funeral, actual footage of your funeral, to people crying? That's some guts. That's what I loved about learning this new whole history of Korean cinema, is that it's not just biopics that do this. Around the same time that this movie came out, the biggest comic book movie of the year in South Korea was it was kind of like a Quentin Tarantino style alternate history, where but except that the guy that they were murdering was a recent ex-president who was still alive and lived not too far from where they were filming. And it was about the people going after him. So Korean cinema has some guts.
Yeah, it does. I have a lot of respect for this film. it was interesting to watch it because culturally I was like, I'm very ignorant and I don't necessarily understand all the nuance of why this guy sucks. Like I got the broad strokes, but like some of the things like in terms of his fascination and alignment with Japanese culture and things like that, like I wasn't necessarily getting all the way there. I was impressed by how stylized the movie was. The other thing too was I was expecting going into it that this was going to be set over a longer period of time because planning an assassination in general usually is like more of an operation. And I was like, oh, this is like 5 hours.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like Steve Jobs, where
Yeah.
they're like, we're going to take all these aspects of his life but fit him into these three events. And this is like, we have a lot of story we want to tell. Let's fit it into this one sad drinking session.
Before we even killed anyone, this was the saddest dinner party I've ever been to.
Yeah, and the idea that like this is every night at the Blue House.
We've all been to this party where one person is drunkenly crying in the arms of a strange woman he doesn't know, and like there's sad music playing. I was like, we've all been to this dinner party, except for the part where people start getting murdered.
How much of a plan did director Kim and these other guys have in terms of this assassination?
Yeah, that's kind of what's all up in the air. Like, people don't know what exactly their motivations were, how long they were planning it. It's obviously like all very covert stuff, and this movie kind of had to grapple with that of like how much was this in the moment, how much was this long planned, how much was this because they wanted to make Korea a better place, how much was this because they were mad at him for making them do grunt work. And this movie kind of had to like read all the accounts and make their best approximation of what their plan and their motivations were.
Should we do like a quick talk through of the film?
Yes, let's kind
or
of
a less quick talk through.
Yes, we open on newsreel footage and a voiceover explaining that Park Chung-hee has been dictator for 18 years as of 1979, and that there is an overall atmosphere of fear until he gets shot. Cut to a breakfast table, and I have the sense watching this that this is going to be different from what I've seen before. There's a woman and her daughter who has done some form of sex work with the president, and this enjoyably crass madam and an agent sitting around a table. The mom appears to be trying to shake them down or something.
Yeah, it seemed like she was maybe trying to get the job back.
That mom was Oscar winner Youn Yuh-jung, who won recently in a very small role. But basically what she's doing is like, what the point is making is the president has a new woman every night. And this mom is like, hey, he said he liked my daughter. Why don't you have her back? We need more money. And this is kind of a metaphor for how this man stayed in power, because they know that he's not doing anything other than manipulating and using people. But because the people that are getting a little bit of money out of it are like, more please. And so that's what this scene is about, is just people know that he's doing terrible things, but they want the tiny little bit of profit they can get out of it. And the way that they react to this mother doing that is by dragging them to a torture cell and making them fear consequences. We talked about how you can say so much in this tiny little sad drinking scene, but this sad little meeting at this other table tells you so much about how he treats the world, how he treats the people in it, how much he cares about the people in it, and why no one spoke out about their treatment. Because he will use them for what he can get and then throw them away like garbage on the side of the road. And they'll thank him for it.
18 years is too long to have power. I was putting together the timeline. He was in charge from very early on in the existence of South Korea.
People don't realize that, like, they're so different now, but after the Korean War, North Korea and South Korea were basically in the exact same position. They both had this power vacuum, and the people that stepped in wanted ultimate power. And in one country, the people rose against it. In another, they couldn't. And you can see how different they went. But Park Chung-hee really kind of tried to make the same thing happen. And it took many years, even after he was gone, afterward, in the era where our book takes place, is one of his men that took over after him. It took a long time to get rid of him, but Korea has really tried to make sure that doesn't happen again.
So then we meet the head of the KCIA, who's at a doctor's appointment, finding out that he is like developing liver disease from his job because he has to drink so much.
Yeah, it's Korean culture that, like, if your boss offers you a drink, you can't turn it down. When I first came here in 2002, that was still, it's not so much now, but it was still this very toxic thing that after work, whether you work for the president or whether you work for like a store, the boss will be like, come on, we're all going out for drinks. You can't say no. If he pours you a drink, you can't say no. And they would go to, I have friends who were invited to they have in the house, but there's like called room salons that are just like a bar with a table in a private room, and they bring in women, topless women, to just sit there and pretend to laugh at your jokes. I can't imagine ever wanting to do that, let alone with my boss. And I've actually had friends who were like English teachers who their boss tried to take them to a brothel. And they're like, no, what? No, why would I go to a brothel with my boss? It was a huge deal. The boss was so offended that, like, you cannot turn down. The boss wants to have fun, and the workers are treated like they have to. And so luckily that has gone away. There is still toxic masculinity that makes it still happen. So watching this film, that feeling was very familiar to a lot of Koreans, and then being like, but what if it was the president who will kill you if you say no?
Question about that.
Yeah.
Did any of these customs create a blackmail culture?
Not that I've heard of. It's very much like a just this is how it works. There was a period where so many people were doing that it would never be something to blackmail over, because like, yeah, that's what you do when your boss tells you have to do something.
Wow.
Messy.
So I'm wondering here, is the KCIA supposed to be protecting the president instead of shooting him? Or is there a South Korean Secret Service equivalent that was supposed to be on the job? Or is this a Jamie Lannister situation?
So the KCI is basically like his private police. They're supposed to be protecting him. They're the ones carrying out all his orders. And they, before and after that, like in Banned Book Club, the people hunting down my wife were the KCIA. And so they're the ones that are supposed to do everything he says. And they're the ones grabbing people and torturing them and beating them on his behalf. They're the ones killing innocent people. This group of people at the top were just sick of doing that. I don't know how much of it was they were sick of hurting other people, or they were sick of their masculinity being threatened by being told by him what to do. That's all up for debate and what their motivations were. It's a matter of he was getting so out of hand that the people that he was supposed to be, that were supposed to be protecting him and carrying out his orders, were like, we have to get rid of him. Because so they talked in the movie about the uprising in Busan and Ulsan, where there were students protesting. They came in with tanks and arrested them all. And what they were discussing in that meeting is his plan was to just go and kill them all. And the universities that he's talking about are out that window.
Wow.
I can walk there within 5 minutes from my house. And so things like that did end up happening in the next regime after he died. So it's not like that solved the problem. The Gwangju incident was where the government went and killed a bunch of students. And it just came out a couple of years ago that there was a short list of schools they were going to go after to make a point, and one of them was one of them was the school my wife went to. So this was something that they realized that's what he was planning. They realized that a lot of students were going to die, and they decided that we need to stop him before that happens.
There's a scene where you see the agents shooting pool and talking about things that you will or won't get in trouble for, and it just seems crazy, like that sending a note to your hometown will get you in trouble.
They're basically just talking about how they trump up charges. When Korea was separated, whoever happened to be north of the border at that time is now North Korean. Whoever happened to be south of the border at that time is South Korean. And so if someone tries to get in touch with their mom back home, they can be charged as spies because they're they're sending messages to North Korea, even if they're like, hey mom, love you, miss your cooking. If they say, oh man, I miss the kimbap in our hometown, then they are promoting North Korea by saying North Korea is better at one small thing. So they're saying no matter what these people are doing, and also during Japanese occupation, some people moved to Japan. It's the same thing if they're communicating with where their family lived in Japan. They can find ways to harm people. And so that's exactly what my wife and her friends were going through. Whereas like they were in a banned book club and there wasn't an official list of banned books. It was if they wanted to arrest you and torture you, they could look at what books you had and say, well, that one's banned. They would just find any reason to throw someone in one of those cells and torture them until they were no longer wanting to stand up and ask for democracy.
What are some of the books that were banned?
Basically anything about politics was banned. They claim they were banning books about communism, but they actually banned books about democracy too, because they claim to have democracy and they don't want people to read it and be like, wait a minute, we don't have any of that. Even just books like one of the ones we talk about, No Rules Tonight, is that Brown Bear, What Do You See was banned because they confused Bill Martin with Bill Martin Jr., who one was a children's book writer and another was a political writer. And people got in trouble for that, which happened again about 10 years ago in Texas. So they just grabbed whatever they needed to get people in trouble.
We see the woman and her daughter from earlier in the film in these torture rooms and the crazy demeaning stuff that goes on. And at one point they're yelling at someone for having a Picasso print because Picasso was a member of the Communist Party. So like, What are you going to do if you get a billionaire who owns an actual Picasso? Are you going to accuse him of being a communist?
There's another film that may or may not be a biopic, depending on your definition, called The Attorney in Korea, that is about the Burim book case and some students that were charged for banned books. And in one of my favorite scenes, they're talking to the prosecutor and asking, just because these students have this book, do you think there's something wrong with them? Does anyone who have this book, does that make them a rebel? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, you went to this university, it's required reading there. It's just a matter of we need an excuse to beat this person. Hey, here's one.
I'd also say too that one thing that Im Sang-Soo does extraordinarily well throughout this film is you get such a good sense of place, but also the size and shape of things. You really get a good sense of the layout of the place where the torture is going on. And you also get a really good sense of like the safe house and its size and its layout and where everything is.
Yeah, at that scene of the torture where it's all one shot and they move between the rooms was so powerful because it makes it feel so ordinary. It's just someone going to work and casually coming and checking in on people. Let's see what's happening in this room. And in researching Banned Book Club, we interviewed people who had been in those rooms, the people that had been tortured. We read their journals from the time, people that had like had their hands and legs tied and like hung from a spit until they said what they wanted them to say. People that were like waterboarded, put their head underwater until they couldn't breathe. People that were beaten and cigarettes thrown at their head and things like that. And so this was just ordinary life there. This was how things got done by the KCIA. And they showed so much in that one scene of not just what they did, but the different types of people. They were in one room was some student activists. In one room, maybe there was someone who was in actual danger. And one was just a mom who dared to say her daughter should be allowed to come back to the Blue House. That woman should be in jail for trying to use her daughter for monetary gain, but she wasn't in there for that reason.
It's wonderful economical storytelling because you get a sense of how broadly this was a tactic that was used. You see all the different, some of the guys administering it looked like a little bored. Yeah. Like sort of like, oh, doing this again. Waterboarding someone. Got it. The energy of it was so well executed. You mentioned Jobs, which is an example of a biopic that I love because I like when they compress someone's entire life and the essence of their life into a short period of time because it makes for better storytelling than the I was born to I died. I love the way he did this here.
Yeah, and it's not just showing that, but the fact that all of the suffering of the people is condensed to a single shot in the film, and then you move on from it, shows that this never touches the president's life. This is the reality of the people, but his reality is pointing to a TV and saying, "Bring me her," and drinking all night.
So I'm
And
curious.
When that happens, he just waves his hand and someone else does it.
I'm curious about his leadership, such as it is. Was he at any point an effective leader, or was he kind of like garbage from the start?
Well, to this day, I forget the statistics, but I just read recently that he's among certain demographics, he's still rated one of the best presidents Korea has ever had, because there's older generations that still have nostalgia for him. And that's why his daughter was elected, because he was known for fixing Korea's economy. But again, he did that by helping these select group of sycophants get so much power, and then workers' rights were out the window, where they just have people working day and night. They'd be force feeding them speed to make them work harder, and so they didn't have to sleep. If you watch Chun Tae-il, that gets into the labor violations and the suffering caused by people for that. But yeah, there are people who remember him for doing great things, but most of it was just horrible human rights violations that benefited rich people and then got Korea some money.
We're still in the first 10 minutes, I feel like, but this is just all so fascinating, because it's truly a world that I just have nothing but questions about all of this.
Why don't we move on to, there is a general in his underwear. What is up with this guy? Or he looks like a general because he's in military uniform. So
yeah, this president had a bunch of people who their job was to be his friend, like they had titles. But the point of that scene is they're treating this conversation like it's a matter of national security, but they're talking about drinking with the president tonight. I think he said, you were elected to the liquor cabinet, not the cabinet. They're just talking about all the things that the president wants, basically, and getting ready for this sad, sad dinner that they probably have to do way too often.
How is anyone able to do anything if they're all drunk or hungover all the time?
I doubt they did much. One of the reasons that this reminded me so much that I felt like it could have been made about the most recent group is like that it came out recently during the impeachment that Yoon Suk-yeol, the president that just got impeached, would send a fake car to work every day so that people would think he was going to work on time, when in reality he was home with a hangover until 4 p.m., then would actually go to work and then leave at 6 and then drink all night. Not much was getting done in either regime, I think, except for funneling money and power.
Amazing.
It really seemed like a documentary what happened, because even after he was impeached, the most recent one, he was supposed to leave the residence within a few days, and instead he refused to leave for a week like an Airbnb squatter, and spent tax dollars to bring in all these world class chefs to have a rager with all his friends for 7 days. So there are people still watching this era of history, or maybe watching this movie and being like, yeah, I could do that.
It's like, did you see the part where he gets killed by his friend?
Don't worry about that bit.
Yeah.
They're talking about which girls they're going to bring in for that evening. This general seems like a real asshole, gratuitously so, in terms of how he treats underlings. But I also wanted to know, Ryan, what is an enka song?
Enka is a form of Japanese song that's kind of like a modernized version of traditional Japanese music. And it was kind of like, now you have older people who are nostalgic for the Park Chung-hee era. At that time, you had older people who were nostalgic for Japanese occupation, which was a horrible, horrible thing that some people made a lot of money from. And so some older people really like that kind of music. And there's so many levels to him inviting that woman, because number one, it's basically like, imagine Trump watching American Idol and say, bring her to me. This was a real woman in the movie. Her name is Kim Youn-ah, but it was actually a real singer called Sim Subong. She had recently won a TV contest. The president saw her and said, bring her to me. And so there's that level, but also the level of, they have this professional singer and a sex worker, and they pick them up in the same car, bring them as though they're there for the exact same reason. They've hired her to come to a personal concert, and the way everyone's looking at her, they see no difference in the two. There's that disgusting bit of it. Not that they should look at either one of them that way, but one of them knows they're there for that reason and the other doesn't. The other thing is the fact that she got famous for singing traditional Japanese music is kind of like if in The Apprentice you showed Donald Trump listening to Russian music. The point that they're making is that everyone accused him of being the type of person who wanted Japanese occupation to continue and had benefited from it. In reality, he loved Japanese culture. And what was funny is when they were sued, the filmmakers were sued by Park Chung-hee's children, one of their biggest complaints wasn't that he wanted to murder people. It wasn't that he wanted to use people, that he had a new woman that he was exploiting every single night. One of their biggest complaints was that they showed him to be a Japanophile. They thought that was slanderous to show him super into Japanese music, even though that's a real thing that happened and is based on a real woman who really witnessed this incident and is still traumatized.
That is wild.
Is that the significance behind them? Because it seems like having that enka singer in is what really breaks the camel's back for these KCIA guys.
And that's part of that thing where the filmmakers really are trying to adapt something that happened in such secrecy that they have to go on all these different accounts and include all the different things that could have set them off. And that's one of the things that a lot of people were upset by, that it's not like this is a form of music that is not allowed, but his specific obsession with that culture fed into what people were concerned about with him and his connections to Japan, that there was still some very bad blood because Japan had occupied Korea for a long time, and not just occupied, but people were, during Japanese occupation, people were forbidden from speaking Korean. They weren't allowed to speak their own language. They weren't allowed to use their own names. They were given Japanese names and forced to pretend to be Japanese, but still not given the same rights as Japanese people. For the president of Korea to be like, man, I love Japanese culture, was not cool to a lot of people.
President of South Korea lives at the Blue House, but when I'm looking at pictures, why is it called the Blue House? It's not blue.
On the top, there's traditional tiles that are all blue. They look a little more turquoise, but they call it the Blue House. It was the presidential residence for many, many years until the guy who just got impeached decided that he didn't want to live there because his fortune teller told him that it was bad luck, because every president from his party who'd ever lived there had gone to jail, so it must have been the Blue House that was the bad luck. He forced them to kick everyone out of the equivalent to the Pentagon and turn that into his private residence, and then use tax dollars to put in a pool and party rooms and golf course for him. We're unsure if the Blue House is going to come back as a residence when they elect a new president.
Wow.
I mean, all that logic checks out 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, the house was bad luck, not being corrupt.
They did crimes at the Blue House and went to jail. The clear idea is to do crimes somewhere else, and then you won't go to jail. But that didn't work.
Curse is lifted.
Okay.
Except that he now went to jail.
So anyway, Park Chung-hee is sitting around with his cabinet, but you had a note here, Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to say that if I had to go to this dinner party 3 times in a row, let alone for however long these people held these jobs, I think I could be driven to murder. And I also think pretty confidently that there's not a court in the land that would convict me, because that dinner party is a nightmare.
As I was researching and trying to be prepared for this, I was starting to write down all the names and jobs of the people at the table, and I realized, that doesn't matter. Their job, that they were given jobs, but they don't matter. They're there because the president needs someone to be sad and drink with. And so there's just a bunch of jerks around the table. And that one that just lies down in that weird pose that he does where he puts one leg up and makes weird faces at the singer is just the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. He doesn't do or say anything, but I'm I want to murder that guy right now just for that pose and the thing he's doing with his face.
What stuff are we missing from not knowing how South Korea works, and things that might be lost in translation in the dialogue? Because some of it, I loved how blunt and mordant a lot of it was, but I had a sense this probably sounds a lot pithier in Korean.
All their dialogue is just about These idiots want freedom. What's wrong with that? Democracy. Who has democracy? That's for losers. I'm sure this is all invented dialogue, but you can imagine that's what they're saying. What was going on in Korea at that time is that a lot of the people who were saying this were the young activists, the people that they were trying to kill. And the older folks, there's a scene in our book that's based on real things that we heard about. My wife grew up in this and did not know she grew up in a dictatorship because it was never talked about, because older generations were just like, this went on for 18 years. We thought it was fixed. It wasn't. It's still going on. It doesn't help us to talk about it. So we're just going to pretend like this is normal. It wasn't until she joined a banned book club and learned like, oh, all of this has been happening my entire life, that she realized. And the people that were going out and protesting, even though people maybe agreed with them, were just blaming the protesters because they're saying all you're doing is stirring up trouble. If you go out in the street, it's not going to fix things. It's just going to bring out the tanks. They're going to get out the tear gas. They're going to do a bunch of property damage. Why are you creating problems? The things happening, in the president's words, are probably things young people at that time heard from their parents or their teachers. It's just a matter of him so dismissing the idea that people would want to be free that he can't imagine that it's anything other than troublemakers, and that kind of spread through the country until people started to realize, oh, this actually is a problem that we need to fix.
I wish none of this was relatable.
They're dissing poor peanut farmer Jimmy Carter and democracy. They're just a bunch of sycophants, although I think they're smart to want nukes because generally bad things happen to smaller countries that give up their nukes, like Ukraine. And I also noted here that this singer looks like she's actually in the 70s, and the other women look like they're in some kind of mid-60s time warp.
Yeah, Rena, you made a note here, and I noticed this as well, that she refuses a drink. And now that we've talked about the context of refusing a drink, was that super bad that she did that?
Yeah, that's a big thing that she did. And you can say so much with a small thing. Like, that's her not giving consent. Clearly, if he hadn't been killed, they had plans for her that night that were not the concert she thought she was doing. And that's kind of the double entendre of the title, is like he thought he was doing one thing and something else happened. You imagine how many times young women were invited to the Blue House and thought, this is a huge career opportunity. This is like recognition of my talents. And really it's because a drunk dude watched TV and said, I like her, bring her to me.
Does bang have the same double meaning in Korean where it means both sex and a gunshot when we hear that in the title?
If it does, it's taken from English. The film had a different title in Korean, and whoever did the English translation really was on point with the puns.
I felt like the singer was trying to keep her head together because she just wants to get out of there without being made to have sex with skeezy old men. But it is go ahead on the assassination. So Kim marches in there and starts shooting, and he seems very efficient with it until the lights go out, because he gets one in the president's chest, he gets another one into another guy. He's shooting like someone who is in a spy service, and then the lights go out.
Yeah, things kind of work out for him, but then his gun jams, the lights are out, and it really feels more like something done out of frustration than a detailed plan. If you're going to do a mass assassination, there's like an order you would do it in based on who's most likely to fire back. But he's just like, who am I most pissed at? I think.
Yeah.
And then my gun jammed. Let me figure out how to do this. It seemed very much like in the heat of the moment and less organized than you would hope. I'm sure that's all based on reports of like when shots were fired.
This is wildly bloody.
Like, yeah, imagine the situation would be.
Yes. Yeah. which totally tracks with reality. But I was astonished by how much blood there was throughout the rest of the movie. I was like, there is just blood everywhere.
There's the one guy who doesn't change his shirt, even though they keep telling him change your shirt. The shirt looks completely red by the end of his time on screen. It seems like director Kim is really enjoying shooting these people.
Seems like the director of the film is really enjoying it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's having a good time.
Yeah.
It gets to a point where I'm unclear on who is shooting who, or why are they shooting the kitchen staff? Because everyone is just shooting everyone now.
But then the second you see a dude with dishes fall down, then it's not fun. Because this film doesn't want to make the president a hero, but also doesn't want to make the assassins heroes either. And the idea of that kitchen scene is that some of the president's guards that would fight back were in that room, and they were just so eager to get rid of them that they took out a bunch of kitchen staff as well. And they're going through and getting rid of all the dangers they could. Also, what they wanted to make it seem like a North Korean attack, which is why they're not just going to take out the targets that they are against, because they don't want anyone that's going to reveal what really happened. You know, a North Korean soldier wouldn't have saved these people, so we can't either. The second half, I think I was really confused by the first time, but understanding the context, they were trying to frame it as North Koreans, which again happened just recently. What the president was trying to do, he actually hid North Korean uniforms so that when he assassinated all the people he wanted to assassinate, they were going to dig up the uniforms and, hey, we found uniforms, North Korea did it. This biopic just keeps describing what happened this year.
Do they really think that, like, their second cousins are that bad at killing? Like, they expect people to buy that?
The plan both times wasn't great. Like the most recent one, the most recent plan was organized in a loteria, which is that Lotte fast food restaurant, over cheap hamburgers. The list of people they wanted to assassinate included YouTubers that made fun of the president. And they were going to declare martial law, kill them all, dig up the uniforms, be like, hey, look what North Korea did. All of a sudden, that's exactly what's going on here. They knew that everyone involved, when the entire ending of the film where there's all these people involved, everyone's stressed about what happened, but no one's stressed because they're sad the president is dead. They're not upset because they want justice. Everyone wants to fill the power vacuum. It didn't matter what the excuse was, as long as they can say this is what happened. Then they had plans of how to make this power vacuum fill in the way they wanted it, and it didn't work out the way they wanted because people got information they didn't want them to have.
Sure, also when you're in a sycophant like vacuum like that too, a lot of ideas that are not great probably seem really smart.
Why do all these hapless kitchen workers have to die because you didn't like someone's music?
It's like those people working on the Death Star who were contractors building stuff, like it's collateral damage.
Yeah, I keep comparing this to more recent history, but because I lived through the recent history and because it's so similar, the reason Korea was saved during the December martial law declaration is that there's so many sycophants that the president and his team assumed that everyone would follow the orders they gave them. They had all these soldiers on call ready for when he declared martial law to kill people. These aren't people that worked for him. These were people who were doing mandatory military service. And when they say fire on the essentially Congress, they're like, no, why would I do that? And the president's like, wait, what do you mean no? You're not allowed to say no to me. So like people that are in that position where their entire life is being a yes man for someone that stands for nothing other than power, you just assume that things always fall a certain way. We know what we're doing. We know who's going to fall in line, who's not. And they don't have a grasp on reality to know how things will actually resolve. And this film wasn't sure if they were doing it for personal reasons or honorable reasons, but what they did not fix Korea. There was an elected leader that took over, but then there was another coup, and one of Park's men took over and led to much more brutality. And that's kind of why these films exist, just to, like, number one, warn leaders like, we don't take your crap, right? Remember, but also remind people that like that doesn't fix it. We need to like hold people accountable. I've posted on Blue Sky and online about all of these movies about assassins. And it's not that Korea is celebrating assassins. It's only in a country that has moved so far past it that they can use it as an artistic metaphor for the need to hold politicians accountable. It's used so often. Like, I go to the supermarket and they sell children's play sets of political assassins from the Lego play sets too of assassins from Japanese occupation. And it's kind of used as an artistic metaphor for standing up to leaders, because violence isn't the answer anymore, but it's a way to discuss it. And you could never do that in America because America has never reckoned with the things that have happened in the past.
Nope.
Nope, we don't like that. I felt like this movie was packed to the gills with unsympathetic people, and I enjoyed watching them. It reminded me of The Departed or, Reservoir Dogs in the way that I was like, I don't like any of these people, but I want to go on this journey with them.
Yeah. So the whatever stooges messed up the fuse box, turned the light back on. There's a whole thing about like, what did you do with the fuse box? I have a sense that director Kim really relishes shooting the president in the head. And these two poor women are just dealing with the inert president. And the thing I really feel emotionally invested in this film is, are these two women who didn't ask to be there going to get through this night alive?
Yeah, and they did. They're still around. She put out many albums after that.
But has either of them ever talked about exactly what happened that night, or again, they just want to be alive?
I imagine that the sex worker, I think, probably isn't as well known and probably not as public. But the singer went on to a career, and I'd imagine she tried to distance herself from that. I don't know how much she's talked about it, but I know that she tried to have a career outside of that.
Well, Jodie Foster, one of the things a lot, like I feel like a lesser woman would have let herself be defined by John Hinckley Jr. shooting Reagan for her, and she, I believe, wrote one essay for Esquire about what it was like that day, learning that someone had shot the president to impress her. She moved on, and now people barely think of it when Jodie Foster comes up. But there's this one guy who I sort of feel bad for, where you see him and he isn't even supposed to be at work that day, and he's like leaves his wife and their impossibly adorable infant to go come into work and shoot people, which he does indiscriminately with a very long rifle. Things just keep going to hell. They go to a situation room. Meanwhile, at the hospital workers are trying to revive someone who has been shot in the chest and in the head.
They are trying.
To be fair, they did briefly do that with Kennedy, but that was, I think, to give the country half an hour to adjust.
And the fact that they don't know who the president is, that's a fun running joke, that nobody knows who any of these people are. They have so much power over every single person in the country, and nobody knows who they show up at doors and they're like, who are you? And they don't believe them when they say. And just the fact that the hospital staff don't realize it's the president when they're like even telling them, we're from the president's office, save this man, and they don't know who which I don't get that. Like, they would know what the president looks like. But or maybe there was more damage to his face than they wanted to show in the film. I don't know.
I imagine getting shot in the head has some effect on your appearance. In the midst of all of these calling people in and people not being recognized, Director Kim kind of loses his cool because he says something that gives the game away.
I think he had this whole plan to blame North Korea, and all of a sudden he's like, I've given up everything anyway. I might as well, again, don't know if he wanted glory, if he wanted to be remembered, or if he just went mad. This is all filmmakers trying to guess at motivations. But yeah, he kind of, the game was given away, and all of a sudden all these people are on the run from in charge to in danger.
It just seems like everything is being run by not the Three Stooges, but by the 36 Stooges. There are those two guys guarding the president's body, and then the president's doctor finally shows up at the hospital to ID him. As everything heads south, all happens really fast.
It all happens really fast, and it captures that energy that I strongly suspect happens. I have not shot anyone. I just want to preempt what I'm about to say with that. I've always suspected if you murder someone, you feel good for like 2 seconds, and then everything starts to come apart. Like, you're like, mission accomplished. Oh no. And I think that this movie does that really well, where they move from that triumphant moment into the chaos and into the consequences really, really well, and show all of the things falling asunder because of this one decision. To your point about the motivations, they thread the needle really nicely in terms of examining examining the idea that we don't know necessarily what was the thing that tipped them over, how much of this was planned, how much of it was spur of the moment. The narrative of this communicates a really good theory as to how that idea evolved and manages to cover all of the potential reasons really nicely and kind of makes it all of them at once. It does feel like maybe it's something that they've talked about a bunch of times, like just offhandedly joking around. Like, what if we killed him? And then also the idea that like there was a moment where he's like, I've had enough. My liver is about to explode. You just brought this singer in here and that's it. I'm done. Like it encompasses all of those ideas really nicely and also does like pin those consequences onto the situation in a way that's really compelling because you have, you know, like you see like the immediate aftermath and the way that consequences come at them very quickly. They have to make a bunch of decisions based on like one terrible decision that kind of spiraled into a bunch of other terrible decisions. And I mean, I was thinking about like when they were talking about the North Korea, you know, like blaming it on North Korea, it's like, it doesn't even matter if it's believable. It's like, do you have enough of a case to sell it to the people who are going to then sell it to the public? Like it's going to be a wink situation, like so many things. But if it's enough,
believable, it needs to
like
be,
if it's enough
it needs
to believe the lie.
It needs to be something that they can also benefit from. That's all that matters. Because the government had claimed many, many things that were unbelievable, and it didn't matter. The more we talk about it, I'm realizing this is Steve Jobs, because they're breaking down like 40 years of Korean history into a sad brothel breakfast, a sad drinking session, and a sad cabinet meeting. Just as the earlier scene represented so much of history and how people were treated, the last scene, there's so much chaos. I still am not clear on everything that happens in the last 20 minutes of this movie. The idea is that after this assassination, Korea was thrown into like 20, 30 years of chaos where nobody knew it was happening. And so I'm watching this movie and I know that like the guy that took over after, the guy that like my wife was on the run from, Chun Do-hwan, he's probably in those scenes. And I'm wondering which character is him, but I have no idea because there's so many people yelling. That when you watch the scene, you don't know who's in charge. You don't know what the plan is. You don't know what the consequences are going to be. And that's how people felt for 20 years after this incident. And so the first time I didn't like this movie because I thought the ending doesn't make sense. And now I'm like, I love this movie because the ending doesn't make sense. And that's how the country felt for so long because of this incident. And you don't know who is on whose side. You don't know what they're going to do. Everyone's so unpredictable, and you don't even know, the characters in the movie don't know who these people are. We don't know who they are. And it just shows that this is not the solution because it's just going to create more problems. But it solved something. It solved some things, but it didn't fix the world.
Yeah, these two poor women in the car crying, just being like, what happened?
Yeah, but the scene before that where he goes and finds them in the room drinking together and having girl talk, I love that scene. It's this moment of stress release where they're like, whatever, let's just hang out a little bit and just forget about that. Let's just drink.
There's this one great note where they've just tossed the shots back and they're on their backs, so they like pop the shot glasses out of their mouths as the guy walks in, and they don't know if they're about to live or die.
And they're giggling like they just got caught smoking by mom or something like that.
And that, like, I mean, and there's a realness to that too, where they're in the room and just like, well, I guess this is what we're doing right now. The way those scenes unfold is really lovely. There were some nicely composed moments in there. It's a rich text of a movie.
They've made this movie 3 times. There have been 3 different bites at this apple. And it, you know, the man standing next is much more the like, let's go to the 3 years leading up to this and talk about what everyone was doing and what their motivations were. Land of Happiness is more after the fact of what the fallout was in court. And so it's interesting that everyone chose to tell the same story through different periods of time. This being the comedic one, you know, it's it's not quite as comedic as when I read a black comedy. I was actually very sad. I'm interested to rewatch the other ones now. I haven't seen Land of Happiness yet, but I'm interested to rewatch Man Standing Next and see how different it is from this.
How much would you say everyone looks like who they're supposed to be?
I think everyone's kind of in the ballpark. And Park Chung-hee in the pictures I see looks much lankier than he does here, but I think they just, perfect character actor. You gotta get him in there to be a creep. And I mean, everyone looks close enough, I think.
Well, what can you tell me about some of the actors in here and what their reputation is in South Korea?
This film has a lot of character actors that blend into roles and do that. The only person that's gone on to become insanely famous is, of course, Youn Yuh-jung. Everyone in there is like, I know I've seen this guy 1,000 times, but none of their roles stood out to me.
Cool. So we have some final dad calls, which are touching, and I feel bad for that guy who just kissed the infant, but then what is with this other guy who calls his daughter and doesn't know what grade she's in?
She's a girl, Rena. You don't need to know what girls are doing.
Just kind of showing that's what this guy's life is. He doesn't see his family. He drinks with the president.
It seems like getting a job in leadership was a real Pyrrhic victory where you're like, yay, I'm in charge, but boo, I'm never going to see my family again, and I'm going to drink myself to death alongside the leader.
Yeah, there's a final roundup of whatever happened to anyone who is still alive from this night.
Nothing good.
There is funeral footage. And I thought, is it me, or did Park Chung-hee's daughter learn nothing from what happened to her dad?
No, she did not learn anything. So basically what happened with her is that her mother had already died, her father was assassinated, and she was taken in by a family friend who ran a cult that believed in fairies and ghosts. And they raised her by saying that they could communicate with her mother's ghost, and her mother's ghost was telling her what to do, and basically turned her into their Manchurian candidate that all the things they wanted out of a president were what her ghost mother told her to do, and raised her to then run for president. And all the things that came out during her impeachment was that whenever there was a decision to be made, she would send all the classified documents to a cult leader who would then make the decision and tell her what to do.
When is this movie coming out?
We're waiting, man. I'm sure there's going to be multiple competing ones. But yeah, she was basically a mouthpiece for a fairy cult leader.
I want this movie, and I want the fairies in there with the CGI, like the chimp in the movie about Robbie Williams from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, this cult would they went all over Korea to every big business and were like, we have the ear of the president, you have to buy my daughter a pony. One of the biggest companies in Korea had to buy a cult leader's daughter a pony so that they would say something to the president.
Okay, I love this because it's like NXIVM became the president.
Yeah, basically. And then it all leads into one another, because after that, the guy who impeached her got this reputation for being like, I will stand up to power. I don't care if it's a president. Even though no one has ever been impeached in Korea before, it's not even part of a constitution, I'm going to do it because I want to stand up for power. And then the next president who took over brought that guy on as a powerful person, and then he went on to become the president. That was Yoon Suk-yeol. The guy who impeached the previous president was the new president who just got impeached because he lied about wanting to make changes. He just didn't want her power because he wanted to have it himself. It's one chain of nonsense. Every time nonsense comes to Korea, it's fallout from this shooting.
Sending classified documents to a cult leader.
Yes.
I mean, at least it's entertaining.
And the guy who just got impeached was sending his classified documents to his fortune teller. So it keeps happening. Keeps happening. You got to imagine how impactful this one shooting was, that not only has it impacted everything, but they've made 3 movies about it. One of them came out before his daughter was elected, and 2 of them came out after his daughter was impeached. So even when this family still has power, filmmakers are like, we need to remind people that they suck so bad.
Ugh. Oh, that is messy.
Politics are wild. Politics are wild.
Yeah.
Again, wild stuff happens everywhere. It's just like the stories are funnier from Korea because a lot of the stuff about fairies and fake cars and stuff are only funny because people found out about them and fixed the problem. People just try to get away with the strangest things.
I appreciate everyone's commitment to trying to at least address these issues rather than allowing them to fester and recreate themselves. There's a willingness to look into these things and to fight against them, because that's not really it's not really our thing over here.
The nice thing about Korea is that people will remove people from power, but the bad thing is people keep voting them into power. It's these older folks with nostalgia that are like, but remember how well the companies were doing? Man, that was good.
Wow. So I guess that's our movie. Are there any other like scenes or things that either of you want to bring up before we move on? It reminded me a lot of that gritty 70s filmmaking. I liked the economy of the storytelling and of the camera work. It was fast-paced without that cheating of making the camera cut that we see so much. And it was intense.
It got so much into it without making it feel like, with Steve Jobs, there's all those moments where it's like, they obviously did not have that conversation on that day. But with this, it really feels like everything that they talked about, everything that they did would have happened that day. I don't know if it did, but it feels like a natural progression of a story while still fitting in so much history before and after.
Yeah, this is a really outstanding piece of screenwriting because it's economical and you get so much in so little time. It's 100 minutes.
Yeah. And there's so many moments where I feel like I want to know more about the characters and I want to know what their feelings are, but it would feel false to give them those feelings because we don't know. It would feel fake if they gave some weird motivation to him and some emotional arc that is conjured up by a screenwriter. That's one of the things that I ran into as I was writing our books. Is I'm working with my wife. I can talk to her about what she was going through, but we're, with the people that are after her, the KCI agents that are after her, like we tried to give them motivation arcs, but I don't want to like create from whole cloth some reason that he's hunting my wife, It's
not their story, it's your wife's story.
For choice picks out of the dialogue, I feel like I need a big grain of salt here, again, because I can't tell if these quotes are more or less trenchant in Korean. I thought it was funny, that bit where they were like, oh, we're only going to kill 10,000 or so people. And then also someone said, beatings make you stronger.
Yep, that's very much what a lot of the politicians thought. The great little, one little action hero line is where he's talking about, 10,000 is enough. And he's like, I forget what the exact line was, but just you is enough for me. Which wasn't true because he shot 30 people after that. But
yeah.
But still a good line.
Yeah. How many people made it out of this night alive?
I do not know. Eventually, with the consequences after, a lot of them made out alive didn't make it out alive much longer. One of my favorite lines was about when they kept talking about loading real bullets. When he's like, we're at the KCA offices, we can't find any real bullets. Because that was a thing. Because guns are not a thing here. There are no guns in Korea. The people protecting all the most powerful people, in the gun, there was one blank, one bullet, and the rest was empty. Because they don't want any shootouts to happen, and they don't want accidental discharge. So the first one is for a warning, and then if they really need it, there's one bullet they can do something with, and the rest is all blank. This is showing in the film that they're all carrying these big machine guns to look tough and look like they're doing things, but they don't have any bullets.
So, Sarah, can you please give our listeners a quick refresher about how we score movies?
Sure. We rate our movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to issues in particular to biopics. And if you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
Since there's 3 of us, let's just read them all off and then discuss afterwards if there's a discrepancy. Sarah, do you want to read yours off first?
Sure. For outward appearances, I gave it a 7. For acting and casting, I gave it a 9. Passage of time, I gave it a 9. Costuming, I gave it a 7. Quality of the script, 8. Accuracy, 8. Storytelling, 8. Production value, 9. Production direction decision making, 8. And then do we care, 6.
Well, nice. Outward appearances, makeup and hair, I gave it a 7. For acting and casting, I gave it an 8. For passage of time, I gave it an 8. For costuming, I gave it a 7. For quality of the script, I gave it an 8. For accuracy, I gave it a 4. Again, we don't know exactly what happened that night. For storytelling, I gave it an 8. For production value, 8.5. For production direction decision making, 8. And for do we care, I gave it an 8.
All right. Well, outward appearances, I mean, we talked a lot about how everyone looked a little samey and hard to tell apart, but I think that's part of the shtick is that everyone's like trying to be just like this guy, but they manage to like give everyone their own little vibe, like the guy that always chewed gum, the guy you saw in his underwear, so you can kind of remember him. So I'm going to give that outward appearances an 8. Acting and casting, I think everyone did a great job. Let's give it a 9. Passage of time, again, I love that they condensed this into 3 different meetings. I'm going to give that a 10. Costuming, that's where we get into the sameness again, but I think they could have made people stand out a little bit more. Let's give that an 8. Quality of the script, I'm going to give that a 9. Accuracy, who knows, really? But I think they did their research to do the best that they could. Let's give that a 9. Storytelling, 9. Production value, it's limited to a few rooms. I really wish that they would have like given more establishing shots of where we were beforehand. Let's give that an 8. Direction, let's give it a 9. And do we care? I don't care about any of the characters because they're all dicks. But I care seeing what happens to them, so let's give that an 8.
Okay. So my average came to 7.45. Sarah, do you have yours?
7.9.
Okay.
I did
Ryan?
that off the top of my head, so I have no idea what I even said.
I think we could probably give you an 8.
Yeah.
Unscientifically.
I said a lot of 8s and 9s, silly.
You had some 8s. You had a 9.
I said a lot of 8s and 9s and 1 10.
Since this is not a math podcast, I'm going to assume that you gave 8 8s, a 9, and a 10. And if I'm wrong about that and someone wants to get on my case, we can do that in the retractions and apologies segment at some point. That gives you an 8.3. So the president's last bang, your score comes to 7.88333333. So we're just going to call that 7.88. I'm so sorry.
So close, but
you did not earn second opinion, but great film.
I don't know if or when we would have gotten to this film without you, Ryan, and it was such a treat. So thank you so much.
One thing that really cracks me up is, so it reminded me of the DC Comics movie Shazam, in that there's so many superhero movies that like on the poster is Shazam blowing a bubble to show like, this is the wacky one. And in Korea, there's so many assassination movies that they're like, there's the exact same poster where it's the assassin leaning back and blowing a bubble to be like, there's a lot of assassin movies. This is the wacky one.
I did notice that there is someone blowing the bubble on the poster. That is so funny.
The whole movie.
Other stuff you should watch instead. In the States, you can currently find this on YouTube and not pay for it, which is what we did. I would have used a streaming service so that it would get some sort of cut, but it was not on any streaming service. So free YouTube version. But I think it's definitely worth watching.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you guys
Yeah,
missed some bits that were cut out on the YouTube version.
Oh,
There's
what
a
did we
lot
miss?
more. When I double checked that first scene, I found it on YouTube, and I noticed they cut out like several minutes of the topless women at the brothel swimming. I assume from that there's other cuts because I noticed they blurred out the screen also, so YouTube didn't take it down.
Aw. And yet it didn't cause me to not enjoy the film.
Yeah. I
Not
don't need to
necessarily
look at
need that.
topless
Yeah.
women to have a good time.
No.
It's always fun with the verisimilitude of being at a brothel, but
Yeah,
still worked.
it's the cause for that scene is just the vast tonal shift from the documentary footage of the horrors of war to topless women jumping around in a pool as KCIA members look on.
Yes.
With that, it is plug time. Ryan, do you have any work that you would like to plug before signing off?
Yeah, so if you want to see my work, go on to ryanestrada.com. You can find out my books, but also there's thousands of pages comics you can read for free. If this gave you a taste for this era of history, check out Banned Book Club. No Rules Tonight. In October, we have Good Old Fashioned Korean Spirit. These are true stories of my wife who lived through this era and was kind of friggin' cool and smuggled books under the nose of the dictator and helped organize protests. And so our book is about how she got into that and was just a dork who liked books and accidentally became the youngest member of Banned Book Club that she didn't know was a banned book club. She just followed a boy there and ended up getting into a lot of trouble and having lots of adventures and working with people that fixed Korea and learned how people faced this and fixed Korea. So check out those books, and there's lots more at ryanestrada.com, and especially Good Old Fashioned Korean Spirit's coming soon. I hope people check that out.
Your wife is a superhero, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I am very excited to look at more of your stuff.
Me too.
So, like in Banned Book Club, there is a scene, it's a true story, where the KCIA, just like the people in this film that are torturing people, tracked down my wife to her home. They called her parents on her, and she just happened to be the one to answer the phone and managed to have a conversation where her parents, overhearing it, thought she was talking to a boy from school, and the KCIA member on the phone thought she was home alone, and then got him to meet her at a cafe instead of coming to her house. And then by just playing dumb and throwing out school gossip about boys, he just got so creeped out by her, he ran away from her.
How old was she when this happened?
She was in her 20s, early 20s.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Freshman in college.
Wow.
So brave. Oh my God. Amazing. Do we have do I owe any apologies or retractions?
No, there's nothing to apologize for this week.
I can quickly add an apology for earlier when you asked about the title, and I said I'm pretty sure the title is something else in Korean, and I didn't have it offhand. I now have it. The title in Korean, according to Google Translate, relates to those people back then. So,
wow, I
those
think
people.
I think the English title is more interesting, and I usually grieve loss in translation, but I feel like this gained something.
Those people back then. Oh, bless. It's amazing.
Quick side tangent. My favorite translation thing was going the other way when the movie Marley and Me came to Korea. And me in Korean is wa-na. So the movie was called Marijuana.
Oh, that's so
great.
funny.
That's great.
Oh, I love a good translation. Those people back then. Oh my God, I love it. Oh, it's so vague. Not now. Those people back then, they were bad.
Yeah. So
just as a side note, our podcast baby has matured and we have launched a Patreon simply to defray some of the costs associated with bringing our show to you, platform hosting, recording, research. Occasionally we have to order a book off the internet or pay for a movie to rent. There's more to come for our Patreoners, but we are offering shout outs to anyone who chips in for us. And with that, we'd love to thank Gates, who has already signed up to be our Patreon supporter.
Yes. Thank you, and we appreciate it.
If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your posts. And tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our handle is at Biopic a Podcast Story. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see our official episode ratings for all of the movies we've done so far. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about 24-Hour Party People with music journalist Maggie Sirota.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us and for introducing us to this film and for taking the time to educate us on
thanks for having
all
me.
Things South Korean politics.
Thank you.
Anytime you need a Korean biopic correspondent, you give me a call. I got a list of wild ones.
This was a delight to have you.
Yeah,
well,
it was so much fun having you, Ryan. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.
And with that, good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night, Rena.
Good night,
Ryan.
Good night, Ryan.
Night. Good day.